Now think about it if you had, if you had a rough night before, you didn't sleep well, and you just you hit the snooze button 5 or 6 times, now you're running late, and all that's noise and stress is just coming at you 100 miles an hour, and you didn't do any of your morning routine, or you don't have a morning routine, then you're not really going to handle the stress that is thrown at you.
Are you looking for ways to be more resilient? Who isn't? I mean, life is rough and throws us all kinds of curveballs. So stick around, because in this episode of the Mental Health Toolbox, we are talking with Bill Murphy, author of Thriving in the Storm: 9 Principles to Help You Overcome Any Adversity. Bill Murphy is a nationally recognized mortgage originator who has been a top producer for over 25 years. Since 2017, he has served as a business coach for the Fairway Ignite program. From 1993 to 1998, he worked as a juvenile counselor for the Department of Youth Services. He is a marathoner, ultramarathoner, and Ironman finisher, as well as a second-degree black belt. He has raised over $500,000 for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, actively supports several charities including Fairway Cares, the American Warrior Initiative, and Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. He is the founder of the nonprofit Thrive Foundation. Murphy holds a bachelor's degree in psychology as well as a master's degree in counseling psychology. All right, let's jump in and learn some tools to thrive from Bill Murphy. Let's go. All right, welcome, Bill. Thank you so much for making time to be on the Mental Health Toolbox podcast today. Really appreciate you making time to share your words of wisdom.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that you have some inside knowledge in terms of coping. And one of the reasons I love to bring people with different backgrounds onto this show to share their life experience and their coping skills and what's worked for you is because even as a therapist and my experience in running groups, therapy groups, one of the most powerful things about that is that when you learn from other people, right, your peers, how they overcame hardships, adversities, it really helps us understand that it's not a one size fits all, but also that if somebody else has found a way to overcome a lot of these shared challenges in the human experience, then we can too, right? That all in the same boat kind of mentality.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I know you're an author, Thriving in the Storm, right?
Yes.
9 principles for overcoming adversity. And those, I assume, were collected throughout your lived experience, right? Which is pretty vast. Yeah. We'll dive into that. Yeah. So other than the author, which is probably your more recent adventures, you've been a therapist for youth. You have a master's in psychology, youth counselor, Ironman, right? As well as a business coach. So I'd love to dive in and kind of hear about how what your journey looks like through that and what you've learned.
Sure thing.
Absolutely. So you want to go ahead and introduce us, give us a little background and maybe what you'd like to share today?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks again for having me. My background is I grew up in central Mass in a city called Worcester. If you look at it on paper, a lot of people will say Worcester, Massachusetts.
I'm guilty of that. I started saying Worcester. Wait, there's no H.
Worcester, yeah, Worcester. And so Central Mass, 40 miles west of Boston. And it's the second largest city. A lot of people don't know it's the second largest city in New England. So it was, grew up with values, kind of a lower middle class upbringing. Pretty rough childhood. Now I've been in the mortgage business for 25 years. Just recently wrote the book, Thriving in the Storm, Overcoming Adversity. And the reason that I wrote the book is when I was growing up, like I mentioned, it was a rough childhood. I was always made to feel less than, not capable of much, or nothing was ever good enough. And that was kind of the theme. And I would find ways to achieve a little bit of success by just brute force and plowing through it. And by saying, I'll show you, I'll show them that I'm more. and overcoming. So that's kind of how that evolved, and just had some. I believe in constantly learning every single day.
Hmm.
Um, I've created routines where that is ongoing. Um, that whether it's listening to books, reading books, meditation, um, journaling is big. The workouts are huge. Um, prepping your day, building your fortress is a great way to start, and then winding down your day. Bookending is very really powerful. Um,
Wow, I know you're just driving past a lot of those concepts, but those are huge. I mean, and I love an underdog story. I am an underdog story, and
yeah,
I love hearing about how other people who have had maybe rough beginnings figure this stuff out. Because I don't know about you, but I wasn't necessarily taught a lot of these principles about how personal development, right? And like you said, building your fortress. I love that analogy. I'm going to steal that.
okay,
Building your fortress every day, and then you said book ending, right?
yeah.
Okay, so maybe you could, as after you finish, maybe give a little background. Maybe we could drive back through some of those, because I don't want to miss that, because for you it might feel like second nature, but for a lot of our listeners, maybe they don't have the frame of reference to know what that means.
Yeah, sure. We can just talk about the thriving mentality that we've developed. I've been in the mortgage business for 25 years, and also segued into coaching for the last five, business life coaching. Before that, I worked for a juvenile lockup. I was a counselor and a group worker. Pretty rough kids. Then I got in the mortgage business, and I love sales. It became a passion. So I use my psych degree in business and certainly in sales, because you're always trying to fulfill a need or create, solve a problem or help somebody achieve, the American dream, home ownership.
Mm-hmm.
And when I feel like in management, I feel like a lot of times what separates the good from the great, or the average or mediocre from the great, is the ones that um, quit the day because of stress. So I'll give you an example. If there's a lot of problems that are thrown at, just say our average salesperson, they may get so frustrated or flustered and just leave and just give up, hands in the air. And in our industry and sales, there was a lot of drinking, or they'll go hit golf balls, or just lose themselves and not return calls. And I always called it hiding under your desk, when you can't find somebody when you need something because there's an issue. The successful people out there will take that issue head on and involve everybody they can to mastermind and brainstorm to come up with a solution. And that when you have uh, when you have that collective group of people being able to solve a problem, there's your mastermind, and usually things get worked out. When you avoid quit the day, you often have um, more issues that are layered on top of it. The more that time goes by, and now you come in the next day and you're still putting out that fire, but that fire is now an inferno, and you're just going at it with everything, and you get a lot of upset people rather than bringing a group together to work things out. So don't quit today, work through it. So going back to building your fortress to deal with the stressors of life is, if you have a great morning routine and you build you build yourself up in your I call it a stress muscle, where you can handle stress of the day in a much better way. Like, you're more grounded. So if you meditate and you breathe and you work out, and you get those endorphins going, you journal, you give gratitude, you're thankful for your blessings, and most blessings are free. I mean, health and my kids come to mind, in the health of my kids come to mind first every single day before my feet hit the floor. And now you start preparing yourself for anything that comes at you, and you're in a good place. Now think about it. If you had, if you had a rough night before, you didn't sleep well, and you just you hit the snooze button 5 or 6 times, now you're running late, and all this noise and stress is just coming at you 100 miles an hour, and you didn't do any of your morning routine, or you don't have a morning routine, then you're not really going to handle the stress that is thrown at you. And so you're already behind the 8 ball that way. So if you're prepared and you're in a good place, then you're like, all right, let's go. We gotta take this on right now, and we're gonna get a lot of people involved to make sure that these issues are taken care of quickly.
And such a solid advice too. Such a great tip is getting wise counsel around you to problem solve, to think outside the box. Because what's that saying? When you're inside the box, you can't read the label, right?
Yeah.
Objectivity.
Sure.
And that term mastermind is so powerful. And I don't know that a lot of people, even though it's more popular now, we use the term, I still think a lot of people don't understand what that is. And I think from what I understand, I've read a book, Think and Grow Rich, right? By Napoleon Hill. You ever read that one? Great book. To me, I feel like it's like the foundation of all other self-help books.
It is.
It's great. Written in like 1937, piggybacking the Great Depression, took like his contemporaries at the time, your Henry Ford, Edison, these giants we think of as companies were just people, right? He would talk about the power of a mastermind in terms of looking at the common threads of wisdom and success and overcoming hardships. And now mastermind is the term we use, right? And in the business world and the, success entrepreneur world. And I'm in a mastermind. Sounds like you've leveraged that for sure. And it's really just about getting other like-minded people to problem solve with you, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
But it's a powerful thing.
Think and Grow Rich. That was the first book, business and self-help book I ever read, and that was when I got into sales. It was, and I think it's the number one personal development book and business book of all time. Most read or purchased.
The audiobook. I like audiobooks because I can do other things like clean the garage or mow the lawn or do the laundry, and it was like a 10-hour audiobook. It's no small thing, but it's not about money. It's about mindset. Going back to your point, right? It's all about mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah. Powerful. So definitely starting the day right is a fire tip in terms of resilience, right?
Absolutely.
Getting wise counsel, right? And so this is coming from your experience especially sales, because I imagine in sales it could be very like hot and cold, feast or famine, right?
Yeah, it can be. Yeah. It can be. And I think it's very important to end your day right. So a lot of us, can, maybe we binge watch TV, or we watch news, or we stay up late. We get distracted. We surf the internet. And, if you kind of put a lot of garbage in, it's really not a great way to start your next day. So kind of eliminate the distractions as much as you can. Hey, you can reward yourself and go watch binge watch a Game of Thrones for a weekend or whatever. And, that's a reward. But if you're doing that, I think it's the average American watches over 4 hours of TV a day. And what could you do at that time? And here's the other thing. We got midterm elections coming up, or even any news or the presidential races that you see. And it's like people get glued to the TV and they have that news on almost seemingly 24/7. And they're doing nothing else other than consuming all this stuff. And if I talk to somebody that just watched 30 days of midterm election coverage for 4 hours a day, and 120 hours, and I wanted to have a conversation with them, I could Google what's going on in 5 minutes and be able to talk about what they know. And so why waste your time? So at the end of the day, same practices. It's very important. If you start your journal, just, hey, what were my wins today? What was I thankful for? Who did I help? What's tomorrow? What are my wins for tomorrow? Like, just takes you 5 minutes to do something like that. It just sets your mind right before your head hits the pillow, and it's a nice way to, like, when I say bookend. I do a little stretching and give gratitude, and I'll write down a little bit.
And that's an easy one to miss, right? But yeah, it doesn't take much time to set aside to do a little stretching and gratitude. I actually do those together in the morning. I'll usually stand on the lawn with my coffee and I'll do some stretches and I'll literally start counting off the things I'm grateful for to start my day.
That's great practice.
Yeah.
And how do you feel? I mean, how do you feel when you start?
Great. I'm ready. Like I'm leveled. I'm not obsessing on all of the things that I'm not looking forward to during the day or the things that aren't going to get done. And rather I'm setting the tone for my mind, right? About the things that I already have, the things I'm already grateful for, the things I will continue to be grateful for, right? Moving forward.
And that's abundance mentality.
Yeah.
So more of that, you focus on that, more comes back to you. If you start, worrying, that's scarcity mentality. And do you know that there's research that shows that as far as worries go, 90% of our worries don't come true, and the ones that do are never as bad as we thought they were going to be.
Oh, absolutely.
But yet we think the same worry thoughts day after day after day. Got to break that pattern. A great way to break that pattern is just be thankful and give thanks and gratitude. Because then you get into, if you're in a low level set of emotions, which would be, I'm tired, I'm down, I'm sad, I'm depressed, there's despair, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm hostile, whatever your low level emotions are, how can you really create from that pit of your stomach? You can't. You want to get to that high level of emotions where you are thankful for life, you are thankful for your kids, you are feeling enthusiastic, you are feeling love, you are feeling joy, you are feeling motivated, and that's where the magic happens, and you can start to create on those high levels of emotions rather than the low level emotions. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's using our mind's eye to envision the state of mind, the state of being that we want to be, right? And bringing us back to the present. It's kind of like that saying, begin with the end in mind, right?
Yeah.
Like you're saying, the projecting the next day. I try and practice that. I try and teach that to my clients and anybody I work with, is the reflect and project, right? Reflecting on the day. Like you said, at the end of the day, how did it go like I wanted? Were there any curveballs, right? Not that everything has to be written in stone, but I think it is important to live with intention, because we want congruence between our lifestyle and our values, right?
Yeah.
Because when we have incongruence, that's when we get the stinking thinking, the catastrophizing, the worrisome thoughts, the intrusive thoughts about what's not going right. And oftentimes it's because we feel conflicted or resentful because we didn't maybe prioritize the way we would have liked. Right. Absolutely. And so projecting the next day with like a to-do list, or thinking about what you want your top 3 things to be, right? Or that saying, eat the frog.
Yeah.
Doing the hardest things first and the most important things first, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Excellent. So would you say that those are some of the 9 principles you talk about in your book?
Yeah. So build your fortress, start your day bookend. That's definitely one of them. That's one of my favorite. That I practice everything. So it was a culmination of journaling over the years and putting this together and what works. Like, a lot of us don't do things because of self-doubt. And I mean, we procrastinate because of self-doubt. And really, what is self-doubt? It's, I say it's the devil sitting on your shoulder whispering in your ear that you're not good enough. You can't do that. You're useless. You're a waste, and you're wasting your time, and this isn't the right time. And then you like, you know what? I'm gonna give in, and you're right. That evil inner voice is just not gonna do this task. I'm not gonna attempt it. And so when I was actually trained, you mentioned, in the bio the Ironman stuff, right? So when I started training, I was running the Boston Marathon, and it was my fourth or fifth Boston Marathon, and um, I took for granted some of the things that I needed to do in my training, which was uh, my nutrition. So uh, if you're not hydrated properly, if you're not taking in your electrolytes and salts, like you can cramp. And that day, it was a New England April day. So I think it was 70 degrees, 40 degrees, sunny, rainy, and a crosswind. And all that happened in, the four plus hours of the race. And I remember I around mile 15, I was cramping like crazy, where I had to walk my legs. I had to walk every mile for about 2/10 of a mile. And I was so upset with myself. I was like, oh man, I'm really angry that I missed this. And then I said, could you imagine? So I'm like, I think I think a lot of thoughts, during exercise. I mean, it's just, and usually it's positive endorphins that come in. And I said, thinking to myself, like, how do people do an Ironman where they're swimming to 2.4 miles, they're biking 112, and then they're doing the marathon afterwards as a little topper. And here I am struggling with the marathon. So at that point, I finished a race, and I was kind of down about my time. And I that night I went home and I Googled, how to train for an Ironman. What would it take? I wasn't swimming and I didn't have a bike. And so I said, I'm going to do it. So this was April 2019. So I'm going to do one this year. So I committed to it. And it was in 2019. I committed to it, and I couldn't find like a coach that really wanted to take me on, because I said, in their nicest intentions were, I don't know if you have enough time. You don't have a bike. You haven't been swimming. You really need a year. You're going to get injured. And so I ended up getting a coach that did believe in me and took me on. And so, jump in the pool, first 2 laps, I had incredible anxiety, and I jumped out of the pool and I said, I don't think I can do this. And then the only thing so I believe in declaring. When you say you're going to do something, declare it to everybody, so there's built-in accountability. Mm-hmm. So I declared to my kids that I was going to do this Ironman. And just knowing that I said that to my kids, that I had to set that example. So I jumped back in the pool and dealt with the anxiety. And to this day, I've done a couple Ironmans. I still have anxiety in the pool or in the water once in a while. But then I had to go get a bike, and I acted like I knew how to ride a bike with when you lock in your pedals, your feet, right? Clip-ins. And so I'm getting fitted for the bike. I do the clip-ins, and I couldn't clip out, and I fell over right in front of everybody in the bike shop. And real. So there was the most embarrassing. And I was like, I can't do this. I'm quitting. I'm done. And I was like, no, I can't. I declared this. I said I was going to do this. I'm going to do it. And so that's how that journey went on. And that November ended up finishing the Ironman in Florida. But when I was standing there with all these athletes at the orientation, and this is some of the stuff that we're talking about, like all the self-doubt just came rushing, an overwhelming feeling of just self-doubt and like, what am I doing? What did I sign myself up for? And just, it was crazy. And I think that's always been part of my makeup, because I would have to say, I would show them I'm worthy enough, I'm good enough. And that's how I overcame, or would overcome to this day, self-doubt and feelings of being stuck and not good enough. So whatever works for you, in that way of coping, if you don't feel good enough, what has you stuck? And interestingly, what happened was that year that I did the first Ironman, I was fixated on a career goal. It was a volume of a numbers volume in sales, right? And for 10 years, I ranked among the top in my industry, but I couldn't push past and break through the glass ceiling of complexity to get to a number that I really had my sights set on. And I was always around the same number for 10 years in a row, and I kept changing things, but I was just so fixated on it. I would write I would write my goals all the time about breaking these numbers, and nothing happened. That year that I did the Ironman, I I was more focused on finishing that Ironman, that I was less focused on white knuckling that I'm going to beat my goals in my career. And what did you know? In December of that year, I crushed my numbers, and I reset the baseline. I reset that uh, that I broke the pattern, and every year since, I've had a better year. So when you focus and white knuckle on things too much, I think you just got to let it go and breathe, and maybe go into another area that where you want to accomplish something, maybe a major goal, and focus on that, and let the other one let those other areas take care of itself. I think
What do you think that's
subconsciously.
about? What do you think is happening in in that experience for you when you took on another big, hairy, audacious goal of personal development that unlocked your business performance for you?
Yeah, I think it had everything to do with letting go. I was gripping too tight on the goal in business for years, and just letting it go. I had a coach years ago tell me, you write your goals down, you study your goals, you know everything. Just let it go. Your subconscious, it's already embedded in your subconscious. Now, this is for people that already know what their goals are, that have them embedded. If you let them go a little bit, because you already know them, they're already embedded, and start to focus on something else, then I think it's going to come, and it'll appear, because you've been able to um, break another pattern, and now it's just the floodgates open for things to come true.
Yeah, something special about that, right? Try
Yeah.
not to force things, but rather just focus on self-compassion, personal development as a whole, and then still having clarity on what we want, having clarity on the change we want to see, right? But not getting so myopic, that we focus on one thing, which has its benefits. But like you said, to a certain point, there's this set point, this threshold. It's sometimes hard to push past. And maybe that's because we are becoming too hyper-focused.
Hyper-focused, yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Personal development is so fascinating to me for all of these reasons. It's not some of the principles sound straightforward, but an application, it's a little bit messy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
A little bit messy.
It is.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's building your fortress. Sounds like, starting your day, ending your day right. But then it sounds like another principle here is not to become too hyper focused on one area that we lose sight of.
Once you're doing it, you gotta be doing the work. Once you're in it and doing the work, absolutely.
Yeah. So once you have that plate spinning, don't be afraid to shift your attention to another domain, right? A life domain, meaningful domain.
Yeah, and the way I set goals every year is I set three big goals, and I use this. So this goes to show you, when I was setting a lot of major goals, you're going all over the place, right? So you're focused on this for a little bit, you're focused on that for a little bit. How can you really give anything your attention if you're all over the place, and you got 10, 15, 20 major goals or that you want to accomplish? That's really hard to do, because you can't give your attention to everything 100%. So just take it in steps, where you do three major goals, and you can focus on those areas. You're going to have micro goals within that, or even create habits. That could be certainly a goal, and then you can be totally aware of where you're at and measure that.
Measure, right? What gets measured gets improved.
It does.
And if you're trying to hit 10 targets at once, it's kind of hard to measure that.
It is.
Yeah.
Very hard.
Or even affect change, right? Yeah. I'm reading a book right now, Your 12-Week Year. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Great book. It talks about the a lot of these principles, the things that get in the way between accomplishing our goals. And that's a big one, like you said, is having more concentrated goals in a shorter window of time, but then taking action, following through on a plan, and then also measuring, right? Because sometimes we think something's not working and we trash the plan, but it's not the plan that's the problem, it's the follow through.
Right.
Can't follow through if we're trying to do too many things at once.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that happens with goals that seems to get missed is ask people for feedback. Like, how am I doing? Hey, I've been working at this. I've been working on giving more compliments or being more gracious in how I greet people. Have you noticed anything? Whatever it is, right? Just like, how am I doing? Or that's why I think coaching is so important, that if you get a coach in anything you do, make sure you're checking in with your coach. Like, how am I doing? Where can I get better? That's, I get coached in business. I get coached in, I do martial arts, Krav Maga. I have private sessions with an instructor to just make sure that I'm doing right there. I get coached in, I just did another Ironman. I get coached in the Ironmans. Swimming, biking, running. I get coached in everything. How am I doing? How can I improve? What can I be better at? I try to surround myself with some good business people and say, hey, I have these things going on in business. What are you doing? How can I get better? What do you see? So just, I think if that goes back to just, who you surround yourself with, and make sure you're surrounding yourself with the right people and not the toxic people that just suck your energy.
That's very wise. Yeah.
Well, so we were talking about that first Ironman when I was talking to some people that have done it, some folks that have done it, and some just various coaches, and they had the greatest intentions. They were really nice people, but they didn't believe in me. So I knew that I needed to surround myself with somebody that believed in me. And even my beautiful mother is incredible, but she's like, Billy, you can't do that. You're gonna get hurt. Like, I mean, I've heard that for 50 years to this day. And she's, and I'll be like, okay, Ma, you're fueling me to overcome. But I just, like I said, all the intentions, and it's not that anyone was being toxic intentionally, but it does feel that way when people tell you can't do something. So you need to surround yourself with people that believe in what you're trying to do in anything in life.
Because we get enough of that from ourselves, right? When we contemplate a big goal, one of the first things that we face in terms of an obstacle is that's not possible. Other people can do this. Not for me. It's not for people like me. And that's a very tough thing to overcome, especially if we're getting similar feedback from the people around us.
Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of the proximity rule, right? Oftentimes when I'm talking to even clients in counseling about getting support, I'm like, well, okay, and goals. And it's, very natural to go to the people who are most convenient for feedback, right? But that sometimes we have to consider the source, and we might have to go outside of our way to get more valuable feedback, right? And feedback that's more targeted, like you said, a coach, right?
Yeah.
Because there's generally a way to figure things out if we want to do them, right? But sometimes we need somebody who understands the intricacies of the challenges and the know-how and how to make that happen, how to make it actionable, as opposed to just talking about concepts with people who don't necessarily get the goal we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. So, oftentimes you have to seek others outside of your immediate family and friends to get the feedback you need to keep you on track.
Yeah. But I like what you said about your mom too, like, because oftentimes, even if people are trying to give us critical feedback because out of a place of love, right? Like, I don't want you to hurt yourself. Right? Are you sure you want to quit your job and pursue this thing?
Yeah.
Things like that. And people, we're all risk averse, right? And so if we see our loved ones taking risks, sometimes we're averse for them.
it's pretty funny. I mean, so if you know what you're getting into and you know those conversations, what you're going to have, don't let it derail you. Like I'll give you an example. So one of the races was down in Texas, and I was just going down by myself to do it. And she's like, my mom says, you're gonna do that race and nobody's there with you.
Mm,
What if something happens? This goes back to you're gonna hurt yourself. What if
right.
something happens? How can you get to the hospital and how can you do this? What if no
Hmm.
one knows you're injured? And so that's the worry we were talking about earlier, right?
Hmm.
The worry that never happens.
Hmm.
So that's when I'm like, Ma, I love you. I'm gonna be fine, and don't you worry.
Hmm.
So just that kind of thing. Just so then I know I immediately need to go talk to, you know, my top five, with what I need to kind of get me on track.
Yeah, I like you say that, the top five, right?
Top
You have your
five.
people, that you trust that are going to keep you grounded. Not to say that it's all positive psychology, right? People who know
Right.
what they're talking, people who have already problem solved these concerns. Because it's not to say that, like, your mom didn't bring up a viable concern, but
Yeah.
it's not a deal breaker,
Right.
right? And sometimes I think, whether it's coming from our own self talk, our own dialogue, or coming from other people who love us, it's easy to go to the worst case scenario and assume that's probable. And then it's a deal breaker, right? When the
Yep.
worst case scenario is most likely not the likely thing to happen. But even if it were to, there's usually a way we can safeguard against it or mitigate the fallout, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's great. So build a fortress, right? Um, be grateful, get some coaches around you, mastermind or otherwise, right? Set
Yeah.
more than one, like, continue to set audacious goals for yourself, right?
And you got to take the action.
Yeah, gotta take
Keep
the action.
moving.
Yeah, excellent. What other nuggets of wisdom or levers would you say we can pull in terms of overcoming adversity?
Check your limitation, like, check your self-imposed limitations. Where are your limiting beliefs? That's part of that self-doubt that we're talking about. You can do anything you want. We're all capable of way more than we set out to. uh,
Mm-hmm.
10 times. You just gotta put the plan in place. And again, if you don't know where to get the plan, I mean, you have coaching in everything, and you have the internet
Mm-hmm.
at your
Right.
fingertips. I mean, you could get started in 5 minutes if you don't know where to start on any task. Um, so don't be afraid. Just know that anything is possible if you set your mind to it. You do the work. You're intentional. You're deliberate, and you're focused on it. And frequent.
Mm.
You got to do the things frequently.
Absolutely, consistency, right? That's the commitment portion, right? Even if you don't understand, I think that's what keeps most people stuck, is not knowing how to start, or feeling like we have to have all of the information, everything outlined in our heads before we start in a new direction, when it's quite the opposite. We start messy, right? How many times have we heard it from people like Henry Ford or Thomas Edison or
Yep.
Abraham Lincoln, who talk about Daniel Carnegie, who talk about these concepts of start messy, start imperfect action, progress before perfection, right? Every failure is a stepping stone to learning how to do something more efficiently, right? It's a necessary part of the equation.
Yeah, you'll fail your way to your goal. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
what you have to do and be
Fail
okay.
forward, right? As it said.
Yeah, fail forward. Fail your way to the goal.
Yeah. And so my guess is that, given your life experience, you have taken on enough hairy, audacious goals that you've learned this, and so you're able to talk yourself down when you get in your own way.
Yeah, I mean, we're all human, right? So we still battle with our internal
Sure.
dialogue. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
battle. So that's where you have to incorporate that thriving mentality that you can do it. I mean, so like the three mentalities that we talk about in Thriving the Storm is victim, survival, and thriving, right? So
Mhm.
the victim mentality is those low level of emotions that we talked about. Something happens, it keeps you down because you're depressed, you're sad, you're angry, you can't, you don't want to function. A lot of times our victim mentality is an excuse not to do things too. Don't forget that.
Mhm.
It's an excuse not to um, you know put your feet on the floor in the morning and continue to hit that snooze button. You could also, then the next step would be survival. You know what? This economy is so bad. These rates are so high. The housing market's so tough. I'm just gonna hang on and survive and not really do anything, just try to get by. And then you could take it a step further and say, you know what? When these tough times hit, there's opportunity here to take advantage when everybody else is giving up, either taking on the victim mentality or surviving, and thrive. And what can I do to thrive? That's where I'm going to start putting some systems in place. I'm going to start prospecting. I'm going to start my action plans and fulfilling those action plans and steps uh, throughout the day, every day, so I can have that thriving mentality. And also, when you decide that you're going to do that, that will keep you going.
Mm.
If you decide that you're gonna lay in bed because you just don't feel like getting up, that's going to keep you there too.
Inertia. A body in motion tends to stay in motion. A body at rest tends to stay at rest, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not to say we don't invalidate ourselves. It's important to be honest about our challenges. Yes,
Right.
okay, I lost a job to the COVID, or the economy is in a really tough place, but
Right.
we've been here before.
Yep.
There's nothing new under the sun. There's really no new challenges. It might be a health issue, it might be financial stress, it might be loss, grief and loss, but there's a process to everything, right?
Right.
And it's important, like you said, to have a vision and find ways to focus on what we do have control over versus what we don't. And I think that's a natural tendency to gravitate toward the things that feel overwhelming, right? Because we want to fix them, but not everything is immediately fixable, right? And so finding a way to turn our attention to the things that we do have some influence on in our lives, potential influence, potential energy, kinetic energy, and finding a way to apply that, right?
Right. This stuff, this is a work in progress, right? So things, my childhood was so rough that I grew up depressed, not knowing I was depressed because I wouldn't admit it.
Mm.
That's why I studied psychology. That's why I got my master's in counseling psych, because I wanted to understand why things were so screwed up and I was trying to understand the personalities involved with what was going on and why they were happening.
Mm-hmm.
And because I grew up thinking that everything was normal, the harsh childhood and the beatdowns and the physical and the shaming was very normal, but it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So it was important to understand that and then get to a place where I could finally admit that I was depressed. And how that happened was just only a few short years ago. I was I was on a run, and I like to listen to books. You mentioned listening to Audible, and I was listening to this book by Terry Real. I don't want to talk about it. It was male depression 30 years ago. And so when I listened to that book, I actually met Terry and saw him on a few occasions. And he happens to be in Massachusetts, highly sought after therapist in the world. And when I sat down and saw him, I said, Terry, I read your book. I didn't realize I was depressed until I read your book. And I was like, I have depression. And your story was about how his dad was so abusive to him growing up. And I said, I felt like I was you in that book and your dad was my dad, but I had it way worse than you. And what he looked at me and he said, you're effed. And he says, you need to go to an intensive down in Arizona, get this all figured out. So that's I ended up going down to an intensive where I uncovered all this stuff. And what the problem was is I didn't realize that I didn't I didn't love the younger me.
Mm.
Because when I told these stories about this abuse and how things went down, I if I was put through the wall and my sister, a year younger than me, when I was 7 or 8, thought I was going to die, I would tell that story matter of factly. If you
Mm.
told me that story about, somebody, your child or a loved one close to you, I'd probably have tears in my eyes. That should never happen to a young child. And
Right.
so what I had to do was start to love myself as that younger kid. And so that was the therapy. But in the meantime, so there's a test, and you know this test, the ACE test,
Hmm.
adverse childhood experience, right? So I took the test, and the clinician, the psychologist there he said, you should be, based statistically, he said, you should be dead or in jail based on what you scored and what you went through. And he said, but what you ended up doing, and this is where the overcoming piece is you became a workaholic.
Hmm.
And you put your stuff into extreme sports. Like I just love sports, and I would always just um fall into my sports, and it would be extreme, whatever it was. And that was my coping. Now, what usually happens? I mean, drugs, um, alcoholism, violence, porn addiction, gambling, obsessive compulsive eating, whatever. Like those things can become coping mechanisms with some of that abuse, right? So
Hmm.
I guess I got the lesser of the evils, where I just became a workaholic and just got myself, involved in sports, and I would just do everything 100, try to do everything 100%. Um, but that tension, if things weren't, I'd bring my tension in the house. I'd bring my tension as much as I didn't want to bring the same home environment that I grew up in. I was doing the little things like bringing problems back into the house from work, and then the whole household would feel it. And that was part of my therapies, to understand what I was doing and just continuing to get better every day
Hmm.
with that. So I've been, it's been a few years, and I've been able to overcome a lot of that, and admit it. I mean, I was like, I tried to be, like the tough guy, and like, we don't cry, men don't cry, boys don't
Sure.
cry,
Sure.
and that's how I grew up. And um, it's just, you gotta love yourself, and love
Hmm.
your younger self, and make peace with your past. So that's one of the things we talk about in the book, is like, I I didn't love myself, and I didn't really make peace with my past, but um I do now. And that's
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah.
That's a very important step in achieving things later on in life. Is if you carrying that baggage, that heavy weight with you everywhere you go, it's really going to be hard to achieve things that you set out to, when you got the 250-pound weight
Right.
on your shoulders. So you got to let go.
Absolutely. And I think I really appreciate you sharing that part of your story, right? Because I feel like most people, just survive in light of trauma, right? Which is essential, right? We have to survive. That's what trauma is. It's the,
Yeah.
PTSD. It's the brain's attempt to protect us, right? So we find ways to survive, be that through sublimation, right? Taking our experiences to the extreme and other things, right? Transferring that energy to something more productive, which is a healthy coping skill. But at some point, like you said, we have to integrate the trauma. We have to find a way to love ourselves in spite of, find a way to accept, right? To seek understanding. Because if we don't, like you said, then we have so much mental energy, and our mental RAM is tapped out trying just to maintain, right?
Yeah.
And that
So,
affects other things that are important to us, right?
right.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that while I was in that intensive in Arizona, so this is part of the self-doubt stuff, right? They diagnosed me with PTSD based on my childhood, right? And so the first thing I said to them, I said, no way, that's impossible. I'm not a warrior. I'm not a soldier. I wasn't on the battlefield. So I wouldn't even give myself permission. I didn't feel worthy enough of a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that sound crazy, right? So,
Right. Right.
so in retrospect, in looking back at that, it's like you have to allow that, to be your being. I mean, otherwise you're still stuck in that past. So, that's, I was in denial, and then, that took work too. When they came up, I was embarrassed too, embarrassed about depression and embarrassed about that diagnosis, but it's my makeup and it's my past. And, we all have a past, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's where you start, when you make peace. And you have to,
Absolutely.
if you hide it, then it's just more stuff you're keeping stuck inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And finding a constructive way to process it. And it is a
Right.
process. With any grief, there's going to be denial before acceptance, right? Before change. But if you had not found a way to survive in light of your trauma through work, right? And like you said, healthier of the evils, in terms of
Yeah.
coping, then it could have gone a lot worse, right?
Yeah.
It could have gone a lot worse. So I want to commend you for that. It's not an easy thing to take that energy and direct it towards something constructive in spite of, right? That's a huge
Right.
accomplishment. And there's a season for that, and there's a season for healing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. There is. There
Yeah.
is. I think it's important, also, we're talking about seeking, your goals, and it's nice to hit your goals, but where it really matters is going from success to significance and finding a way to impact others and give back.
Mm-hmm.
What's your legacy look like? What's your legacy plan? So many people don't think of that. And, that's actually a conversation that I had with my father after I confronted him and said, a few years ago, I said, Dad, why did you do those things? And he said, because you were a difficult kid.
Mm.
And I said, but no child deserves, that kind of treatment and shaming and beatdowns and things of that nature. And I went on to say that I said, here's the thing, you're not building your life towards making a difference. And what will end up happening is your tombstone someday is just going to say your name and the date you lived. And it's not going to have anything else. And that for me is, why we do a lot of charity work. We do a lot of giving back. We just started a nonprofit. So there's things now that I want to do to, um, leave this place a way better than when I came in. And that's where I'm at, in my life. And I want my kids. My kids are, my son's he's 22. My daughters are 19 and 16. And I want my kids to see that stuff, because they've been around me when I've been tense and stressed
Mm-hmm.
and not my best self. And so some of these things are super important. And it keeps me putting my feet on the floor. So we talked about that thriving mentality. Things like that, not only for yourself, but for others, can certainly carry you through the day.
Absolutely. And I think that's an innate human need is altruism, right? To contribute more than ourselves, right? To
Yeah,
improve to leave this place better than we found it, right?
sure thing.
Yeah. So I really appreciate the work you're doing and for making time to be on today to share your story and all of this life application, which is really, what our audience needs is to understand that they're not alone, that life is messy, but
Yeah,
there are levers we can pull, right, to make sure that we're grounded, that our mental health is in check, that our relationships are in check, and in spite of adversity, right, there's always things to be grateful for,
there is.
and we always have options, right?
There's always options.
Always options. That's right. So where can our audience learn more about you and the work you're doing?
Sure thing. Thrivinginthestorm.com. You can reach me there. And
Excellent.
we get some resources on there too, some newsletters and blogs, and some of the podcasts we've been on.
Excellent. And your book is obviously on the website.
Yep, and it's on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
Excellent. Excellent. Everywhere books are. Gotta love Amazon, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. And let's see. This would be your site, right?
Yep.
Excellent. I love your book cover. That's really cool.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I like the colors. Yeah, 9 principles to help you overcome any adversity, thriving in the storm. So anybody who wants to learn more, here's all your socials, right? Facebook,
Yep.
LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. Yep. That's cool. It's great. Yeah. So easy guy to find. So we'll be sure to link up to all of that in the show notes. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. My pleasure. I'd love to have you back on down the road if you have anything else you want to share, any new words of wisdom. Okay.
My pleasure. I'd love to come back. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate your time, and I wish you a very pleasant week. You're in New York?
No, Massachusetts.
Oh, Massachusetts. Yeah. My geography is not great.
That's okay. That's all right.
All right.
You're in the West Coast, right?
Yes, LA area.
Yeah. Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Likewise. You enjoy the rest of your day, okay, Bill?
You too. We'll see you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, if you're getting value from this content and you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the MHT YouTube channel and podcast and share with your friends and family. It helps to raise mental health awareness and grow this channel. Well, there you have it, another tool to help you thrive. Until next time, make good things happen. Bye-bye.